Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war news update. The first part thereof for my goodness, the 11th of August 2025, the end of my holidays, is nigh. Boo. We are going to start with the Ukrainian general staff figures, as ever, for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. 1,000 personnel lost. That is obviously on the 1,000 threshold that we talk about quite a bit. So it's a tiny tick up. 4 tanks, 7 AFVs lost. Typically low numbers there. 37 artillery systems. That's above the daily average. We have seen a couple of days of really high numbers in that category over the last week or so. That is above the daily average of about 25. The last time I looked, it's now 37 there. So that's fairly decent, but not as high as it has been. And 2 multiple launch rocket systems, that's fairly useful. And 131 vehicles and fuel tanks, well above the 100 threshold there that I often arbitrarily talk about. So some fairly decent numbers for the Ukrainians, I guess. We're going to actually talk a little bit about personnel before going on to a Adria Perpetua loss list. Tatarugami from Frontintelligence Insight says desertions, AWOLs, manpower shortages, and recruitment struggles are often linked to the Ukrainian army, and rightly so. I've spoken about these issues at length, but the situation on the Russian side is also worsening. The issue deserves wider attention, and here's a thread. First, while Russia continues to receive a steady flow of recruits, only a part of them can be considered true volunteers. That what's actually happening is a form of hidden mobilization that has not only persisted but accelerated in recent months. Let's talk about it in detail. In the past, Russia resorted to recruiting prisoners to get more people. That approach has shifted. Now, individuals arrested on suspicion of various crimes are offered the chance to sign a contract with the MOD on the spot, often as a way to avoid criminal investigation. This isn't an isolated case, but a widespread practice that's been in place since last summer. Russian media outlet Vyostka conducted a thorough investigation. One of their key findings is that it's a mandatory action all police officers are expected to offer detainees. This practice has expanded to those already under criminal proceedings. We know this because several scandalous cases involving paedophiles drew attention after investigations and prosecutions were dropped once the accused joined the military and courts closed their cases. Authorities incentivize police officers to secure contracts. Officers who coerce detainees into signing receive financial bonuses. Sometimes that exceeds a monthly salary, though it varies by region. Around 12% of all arrested across Russia end up joining the MOD before trial. Another rapidly growing pool comes from yesterday's conscripts. Whereas conscripts were previously offered contracts after 6 months or near the end of their service, cases are now emerging of conscripts being pressured into signing contracts immediately following boot camp. The catch: these recruits are officially volunteers and not mobilized. But the pressure to enlist is often physical: beatings, hazing by the soldiers, and threats of reassignment to dangerous combat zones like Kursk Oblast without the benefits granted to contract soldiers. Russia also has millions of undocumented immigrants who face deportation. In December 2024, Putin signed a law requiring all undocumented people, including Ukrainians, in occupied territories without Russian passports to leave. Those who sign contracts with the MOD are exempt. A man caught with a small joint in Russia, who then faces police threats of having large quantities of drugs planted on him to send him to jail, can hardly be called a conscious volunteer. This manipulation disguises coercion and is a good example of hidden mobilization. This, of course, in no way excuses the Ukrainian side for its sloppy mobilization, which suffers from poor practices, outdated regulations, disorganization, and local corruption, issues the central authorities have not sufficiently addressed, undermining the mobilization. But any comparison framing forced Ukrainians fighting against patriotic volunteers is pure manipulation aimed at undermining Ukraine's defensive efforts. Russia has never really stopped its mobilization, and over time its methods have become more diverse and harsher. Conclusion is clear. While Russia can recruit more people and thus outnumber Ukrainians in the long run, sustaining this pace demands increasingly unusual measures and growing financial and legal resources, something Russia cannot maintain for many years. Something I've been talking about previously, that Russia have this advantage where they can kind of break the rules, break the norms, the moral norms, political norms of recruiting of scare quotes recruiting in a way that Ukraine can't, and therefore there's an asymmetry there where the Russians can end up getting more boots on the ground than the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians followed suit with the convict recruitment program of their own, which was, I think, better handled and more morally upstanding than the Russian equivalent. But you know, who gives a damn about morality is what the Russians would say when all you need are boots on the ground to throw into the meat grinder. And Russia are continually able to out recruit the Ukrainians, as well as getting migrants and foreign mercenaries and whatnot to a larger degree. Um, we're now going to go on to the loss stats. We look at the Russians first. Not too many Russian losses for Andrew Perpetua yesterday. Far more Ukrainian losses, but actually the vast majority of those are surveillance and comms equipment and UGVs. And I keep saying that although these are both important, they do have value. They're not nearly as valuable as, say, a Striker. A UGV is going to be $50,000 worth of kit or less, depending on who has produced it, whereas a Striker is worth an awful lot more than that. Okay, so first of all, we have an air defense system, a Fennec SWP. Wow, that Fennec is uh, Desert Wolf, isn't it? Fennec SWP KNDS, right? Um, Okay, so it's equipped with a Stinger. So it's one of these short-range air defense systems that has. Wow. Okay, so I've not seen that one yet, but there it is, armed with Stingers on top. Looks pretty cool. That's going to be your short-range system there. That has been destroyed by Lancet. We've got a lot of comms equipment, Starlinks, a lot of UGVs taken out by night vision, FPV, Vandal drones, drone drop bombs, all the drones there. Okay, onto artillery. We've got damaged S-222 Bogdana, produced by the Ukrainians themselves. We've got a single undescribed tank, single IFV, destroyed YPR-765. That's the Dutch version of the M113. And the APCs, we've got Snatch Land Rover thrown in, taken out by Night Vision Vandal drone, a couple of M113s, PBV 302. That's the Swedish provided APC that has damage there. So there's a few bits and pieces, MRAPs, Cubbies, and Cossacks and whatnot, some Humvees, and then onto quite a lot of civilian vehicles, a couple of e-scooters as well for the Ukrainians as well. So showing they are using those too. So yeah, it's nothing too crazy, just a lot of surveillance and comms. And I've said for a long time, you are going to see more and more UGVs on the list because they are going to be using them instead of they will use and lose UGVs rather than use and lose people. So they will become a larger and larger contingent of proportion of the loss lists that we see. Right, for the Russians, quite a few D30 and a D20 there. Artillery pieces, old Russian towed artillery. We've got a track guard and shed and another undescribed tank there. Single mobility vehicle, a couple of trucks, and that's it for combat assets. So not too many at all for the Russians. Quite a lot of ATVs, as we'd normally expect. Motorcycles, quads, buggies, golf buggies, e-scooters as well on there, and then civilian vehicles. So nothing too crazy, really, for either side. The Ukrainians losing more than the Russians in kind of sheer number of pieces of kit, particularly if you take into account the surveillance and comms equipment and UGVs. Okay, right. Moving on to other bits and pieces. Well, no, various sources now to support sort of losses and what's going on the front lines. Here you can see footage that's doing the rounds showing the sheer scale of the use of FPV drones, given the fiber optics that are strewn across the landscape. This is absolutely incredible footage here. And there is even an account of, I think, a Russian motorcyclist who got clotheslined by some fiber optics. It obviously didn't break. And or maybe they did, but they caused his face some injuries, I think. They can be dangerous as well. But I hate to think what this is doing for wildlife, for bird life, and whatnot. But yeah, it just shows you the scale of the use of these fiber optic drones. But as Andrew Perpetua says, only a few percent of drones are fiber optic, like 1 or 2%, something like this. And you see how much fiber is everywhere. Just absolutely incredible. Yeah, this is a guy that got clotheslined. A while back, there was a video of a Russian on a motorcycle getting clotheslined by fiber optic cable. Fortunately, it didn't show him hitting it, only the aftermath. I find it funny. Yeah, so just incredible footage there. Right, okay. Ukraine is building a 1,500-kilometer wall that weighs nothing and kills drones with mass. From underground dugouts, soldiers monitor jammers that can grab control of Russian FPV drones mid-flight. When it works, the drone just stops responding to Moscow, to the Russians. The system is called Damba and it hits targets from 200 meters to 3 kilometers away. Russian pilots think they're controlling their drone until Ukrainian operators switch on the jammer and take over the frequency. But frequencies do change daily. Quote, if the enemy sees that the 5.2 gigahertz channel isn't jammed, they'll start using it, says one expert. Both sides keep adjusting. It's invisible warfare happening above every trench. So this is something that Ukrainians have been wanting to get into place. I don't know how realistic the full version of this would be right across the front lines, where you can have a wall of jamming, but this would really, cause the Russians a massive headache. Now, one does wonder, of course, if the Ukrainians are ahead of the game with this tech, how far behind are the Russians? As it's often a game of sort of cat and mouse. One side gets there, but the other side eventually follows suit. Anyway, we'll move on. Now go to this fake Ukrainian PTMUs. So these are types of mines are drone dropped with real ones to maximize strain on Russian logistics and clearance operations. Russians must be very cautious with the PTMU with its magnetic influence fuse that can be triggered by a soldier's metal gear and its anti-lift gyroscope. So it's triggered both by um, magnetic a magnetic fuse that goes off when it's near metal. So if a vehicle drives past, then obviously that's a problem. But even a personnel with gun and magazines and whatnot could well trigger it. And then also if you try and pick it up, it's got a gyroscope, a bit like those kind of old car bombs that you'd see from the IRA or whatever, with the the mercury on that. If it tilts one way, if you go over a bump, then that's the end of your car. Yes, similar to that, I would imagine. So that is a uh, yeah, let's look at this one. This is from May the 13th. Ukrainian Baba Yagas lay PTMU magnetic influence shaped charge anti-tank landmines on Russian-controlled roads every night. Every day, the Russians have to clear any that didn't destroy a vehicle. Here, they lay a demolition charge with a delay fuse using a Mavic drone. Wow. So, that's the sort of thing they're doing, but they're also laying a load of decoys just to put extra stress on the Russians. Obviously, the decoys are going to be easier and cheaper to manufacture. Um, so here, what do we have? Ukrainian Air Force destroying the occupiers' command post in Solidar. We heard yesterday, I reported on the Russians losing quite a lot of troops going from Solidar up towards Pokrovsk. So it seems like Solidar, just south of Pokrovsk, is a major area of Russian, it's a command node there, and a building that supposedly is being used by command was completely destroyed. So that's good news. And another supposed command post in Zaporizhia was destroyed using GBU 62 guided glide bombs. So that's good news for the Ukrainians. Now, talking about Zaporizhia, there was the claim from Andriy Shchenko, the mayoral advisor to Mariupol, obviously no longer able to be in situ, was saying that there is a huge movement of equipment from the Russians up to both Donetsk and Zaporizhia from the south. So they are mobilizing forces around there, or reconstituting, or doing whatever, worrying that Zaporizhia could be and obviously Pokrovsk could be a place where they are going to focus their military. Well, the invaders are bringing in additional forces and equipment to the Orikhiv and Hyliopole directions in Zaporizhia region. So these are sort of from halfway across the Zaporizhia kind of area towards the In fact, it's interesting now that they don't show this as the reservoir, as it's now kind of not really full of water. But this would otherwise be the edge of the reservoir there. You got Orikhiv and Halai. Is that Halai? Much further over to the right, it might be actually. So anyway, those are areas where the Russians might well be concentrating extra forces. In particular, this involves a transfer of regular equipment of the Russian airborne forces, so the VDV. That's their crack. Those are their crack troops, supposedly. Spokesman for the Defense Forces South Voloshin has said. Okay, moving on. I just thought I'd include this. This is absolutely insane. So you've got a Russian soldier here.
Чтобы вы понимали, мы сейчас находимся на войне.
So he's basically saying we're currently at war. We're in a grey zone. This like pond is the front line. It's like, and you've got explosions going off in the background, and the local Ukrainians of one sort or another, are happily just fishing on the pond. It's absolutely insane.
Типы выплыли на ставок, ДЛБС, нахуй за вот этой полкой. Ля, дебилы. Ебать народ пошел.
He says people these days, goodness me, they're just fishing on a lake in a war zone. So Russian soldiers filmed local residents in the grey zone of Donbass casually swimming in the middle of the lake and fishing, while just beyond the nearby tree line, a combat engagement was underway and active fighting was taking place. Behind them, smoke from incoming strikes could be seen. Insanity. So, moving on now to distance strikes, and we have another relatively quiet night from the Ukrainian point of view, or from the Russian point of view, I guess. Ukraine was attacked with 71 drones and 0 missiles. 83% of the drones were shot down or intercepted, 59 of them in real numbers there, which is a good result considering they were all fired at or near the contact line. This is really important, actually. So if they're getting an increased interception rate when they're firing them near to the front line, that is good news for the Ukrainians. I don't know if that's just a one-off or we might see that trending. The 12 hits happened in 6 different places. And one of the worst places hit or focused upon was this town called Shostka up in the Sumy region, up in the north. This is routinely targeted, and I figure it must have some military significance. Obviously, it doesn't have to just be that. The Russians are very good at targeting pretty much anything, but there does seem to be some fairly targeted strikes that go on here. I wrote last night, says Tim White, about the reported attacks by Russia on Shostka, a town in the Sumy region. Officials say in the Sobychivsky district, warehouses and equipment were destroyed. In the Ivotsky district, 2 houses and an infrastructure facility were damaged. Yeah, so we don't know too much about what really was hit there and whether it was indeed a military target. Then we hear that 1 person has died, 5 more injured in Kharkiv. That was targeted with artillery and drone strikes, particularly in the larger Kharkiv area. So some damage done there. And then horrors yesterday as the Russian used aerial guided glide bombs to attack a bus station and a university medical center in Zaporizhia, injuring at least 12. First bomb struck a bus station. The second hit the university medical clinic. Rescue workers were still searching for victims who may have been trapped under the rubble yesterday afternoon, my time. And actually, it is caught on video to some degree here, if I am right. Russian forces hit Zaporizhia's bus station and a medical clinic with 2 guided glide bombs, injuring 20. The strike came 5 days before the Trump-Putin summit. Oh, you can see it just there in the background. Yeah, that's the big strike. Security video captures a glide bomb striking the station. So again, it's just back there. There, you see it right at the beginning, yeah. So that was horrific, and that's what I was referencing when I did my YouTube short video last night, talking about this being a very, very black and white war. The moral clarity is I think pretty obvious with the Russians continue doing stuff like this, and the Ukrainians trying really hard to make sure that they are hitting militarily significant targets, etc., etc. Right. Okay. Moving on. Okay. So then the other thing that I talked about in my short last night that really got my goat was this video. Those peaceful Russians, says Tim White, who came to protect the population in eastern and southern Ukraine, are now happy to publish self-incriminating evidence of war crimes, assured the moral world is too spineless to act. Here, Shahed drones. So Shahed drones now are working as bombers, in a sense, dropping anti-tank mines onto public highways. Just horrendous there, and that will, of course, I mean, they could spuriously, I think, argue that they'd be attacking logistics routes and that the military would be using those roads, but these are public highways, and yeah, I don't know, just Russia. SBU drones have attacked and damaged a plant in so now moving on to what Ukraine achieved last night, and the one that most people are talking about this is this plant in Nizhny Novgorod region that supplies KH-101 and KH-32 cruise missiles to Russia, to the Russian armed forces, in order to strike Ukraine. That has been hit. In fact, there's quite a video showing an explosion. You can see part of it's already on fire, and then another one hits there. So the result of the overnight attacks, says Tim White, in Russia's Nizhny Novgorod region, an important factory in the town of Arzamas has been hit by drones. The building was already burning when another drone made another hit there. And indeed, I believe 4 explosions took place at that facility. The Arzamas instrument making plant, APZ, produces instruments for the aviation and space industries. 4 explosions were reported. Yeah, I don't know why he says no explanation what's happened there. It definitely looks like drones to me. All right, SBU attacked a factory there that helps to produce KH-101 and KH-32 cruise missiles. So that that footage is doing the rounds. There, actually, I think I've got some more. Is that here? There is some footage of the damage to Nizhny Novgorod after it happened that gives us here it is. Okay, so yeah, I probably should have gone on from there. So this morning, the damage to the Arzamas factory in Nizhny Novgorod can clearly be seen, though in truth, it may not hinder operations for too long. So there is some damage done to the building. A lot of windows blown out. There's a couple of holes in there. It's difficult to know what happened inside. Imagine there's a bit of carnage inside, but doesn't look like there needed to be fire engines or anything called to the scene. Photos of the site before and after. So that's what it looks like. It's obviously a military industrial site there. And here we have some of the facade completely, very much damaged there. But it's difficult to know for how long the production there would be impeded. So that was there, and then there were strikes supposedly on Tula region last night. Tim White was reporting it kind of live at the time, and he's saying that there were reports, but then nothing came out about it, and he's trying to work out what happened. There's still silence in Tula region this morning on what was hit during the drone attack last night. Of course, it may have been a Pantsir air defense which caused the deaths and damage, or something significant which Ukraine struck. There'd be the only reasons for a cover up. Why is he saying that? So Russia says 2 people died in a drone attack, quote, in a drone attack on a civilian enterprise in Tula region. Of course, they're going to say that. Governor Dmitry Milyev also confirmed 3 other injuries and they were taken to hospital with problems of varying severity, but kind of no one knows what's been hit. So potentially some success in Tula region. Also, here's a thread from War Translated on the railway infrastructure that has been targeted over recent weeks. And you can see that there's been a real attempt to take out a couple of lines in particular of the railway back inside Russia. This looks like Krasnodar, is it Voronezh as well? Or I get confused. Volgograd and Foreign Nation might be Volgograd. Ukrainian forces have carried out 12 precision strikes on Russian railway infrastructure in recent weeks, mainly in the south. These attacks disrupted key junctions and slowed military cargo flows to Crimea, Donbass, and North Caucasus. Conflict capital reports. Analysis at conflict capital note that Russian forces failed to achieve strategic gains this summer, but several threats remain. The northern front area near Kharkiv is stable. The Russian attacks repelled, and the enemy focused on holding ground and exhausting Ukrainian units. From Tversk to Pokrovsk, there's a bit of an update. I couldn't continue with this. From Tversk to Pokrovsk, Russia relies on massed artillery and small assault groups. Fighting near Rodinsky is key, as Russian forces try to pressure Ukrainian logistics and avoid direct urban contact. In the combat in the Konstantinivka area, Russian troops attempt to cut off Turetsk's supply routes by attacking from multiple directions and seizing key heights for FPV drone deployment. In the Serebyansky forest, Russian units increasingly use small infiltration groups to probe weak points, achieving limited advances and threatening rear areas. And the southern front remains the most dynamic, with Russia holding defensive lines in Zaporizhia but moving reserves near Berdyansk and Mariupol. In Kherson, both sides fight for control of river islands and crossing points. Analysts emphasize that the situation remains tense across all sectors, with Russia seeking any opportunity for a breakthrough to exploit Ukrainian defenses. But one thing that the Ukrainians are trying to do is hinder the Russian ability to attack by taking out their logistics behind the lines. So they can't get troops from A to B. They can't get supplies from A to B. Now, talking about the Ukrainian drone strikes over recent weeks, they have been relying on the Lyuty drone, this one with a kind of a joined upside down V shape tail and twin tails themselves. So Ukraine's Lyuty drone warhead has apparently grown by 50% at the cost of 400 kilometers of range. You always have this, weight, which is payload, so weight of explosives against distance it can travel. So remember that yesterday, that Lukoil facility in Koma that was 2,000 kilometers from Ukraine, it didn't puncture um, the outer shell of the oil container, and that's probably because the drone had to go 2,000 kilometers. That's why it goes all that way and can't get through, and that's your payoff. If you want a bigger payload, you ain't going to get that far. So anyway, something changed in Ukraine's long-range drones. Their targets are suffering more damage, and the answer might be in the payload. So Lyuty drones could well be doing more damage at the moment than they previously were. So certainly for those targets that are closer to the Ukrainian border, the Lyutis can do more damage than they previously could. That's what you want to see. Take that Nizhny Novgorod um, site. You'd like to see more damage being done to that, wouldn't you? Right. Following strikes, says N-Strike, by Ukraine's drone forces, Rosneft's Ryazan oil refinery, the largest of its kind by the corporation, has halted operations for an entire month. The attack heavily damaged two out of three crude pumping and processing terminals, cutting production by at least half the plant's annual capacity of 13.7 million tons, while the Novokubishevsk oil refinery has suspended operations for an indefinite period. Really good success for hitting Russia's hydrocarbons infrastructure over the last few weeks there. Okay, now on to other bits and pieces. I'm not going to talk too much about peace negotiations. I'm going to do a separate video for that, just a little bit of an update. But we do hear that Azerbaijan is flexing a little bit. Interestingly, Azerbaijan has just given $2 million worth of electrical humanitarian aid to Ukraine as a result of Russia striking their own hydrocarbon infrastructure that connects Azerbaijan to Ukraine and elsewhere. If Russia continues to strike energy facilities related to Azerbaijan in Ukraine, Baku will begin to consider lifting the embargo on the supply of weapons to Ukraine that are in its arsenal. Media close to the Azerbaijani presidential administration said. So we had the meeting of Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, and Zelenskyy yesterday, and they have come out with this $2 million worth of aid to Ukraine that is humanitarian, non-lethal, but the next step is, we've got some old Soviet weaponry and whatnot that Ukraine would definitely like to get their hands on. And so Azerbaijan are flexing there, and they are not happy at all with Russia at the moment. There's been this peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia that's really, I think the work's been done by Turkey of all people there, and then Trump then took the plaudits for it at the end by having the two invited over to the White House so he could say, "Look, I'm a deal maker." He's not really a deal maker. The deal was done previously. I think it was just the icing on the cake. And so on and so forth, and then they go, "Oh, you can have a Nobel Peace Prize" type thing. It's all rather obsequious and yeah. Anyway, the relationship between Russia and some of its neighbors is fascinating at the moment and is something to watch. This is one area of success where Russia seems to be causing problems all over the shop. It appears that there are problems for Russia coming from some of these sort of Caucasus, Eurasian nations and whatnot. Now, Zelensky's on the money here, exactly what certainly we've been saying, or I've been saying here at ATP Geopolitics for a long time. If Russia does not want to stop the war, then it is necessary to stop its economy. Yes, the success for the Ukraine is contingent upon the Russian economy collapsing. I've said this for a long time, and I still firmly believe it. We're starting to see it. The canaries are in the coal mines, and as I've said, many of them are suffocating. Zelensky reacted to the airstrike in Zaporizhia. He said no deadlines, no expectations from them work. They do not want to stop the killings, the Russians. The only thing they are looking for is a way to kill Ukraine. Um, and speaking of Russia's finances, Zelensky's also met with or spoken with Prime Minister of India, Modi. I think on the phone. I think this is a illustrative photo. We discussed in detail all important issues, both of our bilateral cooperation and overall diplomatic situation. It's important that India is supporting our peace efforts and shares the position that everything concerning Ukraine must be decided with Ukraine's participation. You can't have negotiations about Ukraine without Ukraine. That's insane. Uh, we also discuss. Oh, someone's just passed me a cup of tea. This is amazing. It's just like being at home. Except it's not Ivan this time. It's Helen. Thank you, my dear. We also, yeah. What was I say? So, yeah, it's incredible to think that you could decide the fate of a country without including that country in those decisions. We also discussed, says Zelensky in detail, the sanctions against Russia. I noted that it is necessary to limit the export of Russian energy, particularly oil, to reduce its potential and ability to finance the continuation of this war. So, broaching that very prickly subject about US sanctions on India for secondary sanctions for their reliance on Russian hydrocarbons. Uh, that is going to be a bone of contention. The Indians have both said we're not going to change the way we do things, while also changing the way they do things. So there are claims that they are not buying Russian oil, and they're buying Middle Eastern and American oil. And I guess Zelensky's getting involved in that discussion as well, directly with the Indians. So more power to him. And I mean, it's not as good as a cup of Yorkshire tea. That's absolutely 100%. About 20% of Russian house developers are at risk of bankruptcy. So this is another canary in a coal mine. The Russian deputy prime minister said. So 20% of Russian house developers are at risk of bankruptcy. It's a fifth of the market in collapse. If the high key rate, interest rate, remains for another 6 months and there is no inflow of investment, this share could exceed 30%. It's not looking good in Russia in so many areas of the economy. Now, this is something that has been claimed up in Finland, Russia to Finland, Belarus to Poland, Baltics as well. There have been claims that immigration has been weaponized by the Russians. And indeed, there are claims, even the Daily Mail was talking about this, where they'd normally try and demonize this is in the UK, demonize migrants. They're actually saying that behind it all, or behind some of the influx of migrants to the UK, is Putin and the Russians. now we hear this is Philip Abaji Jr. talking about it from an African point of view. I've interviewed him. Go and check out my interview with him. Russian President Vladimir Putin appears to have teamed up with General Khalifa Haftar, the military strongman who controls much of eastern Libya, to facilitate a wave of illegal migration into the European Union bloc. He knows, Putin knows, and goodness, if I was as evil as Putin, like this is what I would do. I would do this. This is eminently sensible if you want to sensible if you are evil and wanted to destabilize the EU. Destabilizing the EU is most easily done through immigration and fomenting discord amongst the far right. Far left are effectively irrelevant in Europe, so that's why I always concentrate on the far right. The far left have realistically don't really have any power in Europe. Far right, on the other hand, do, and they are growing. And the reason they are so important to Russia, the far right, and why they are getting into bed with the people they used to be enemies with, i.e., the fascists, is because they are so easily um, uh, driven by anger and fear over immigration. So you can weaponize immigration so easily in Europe, as you can see in the United States at the moment. That's becoming a dictatorship over there. I mean, the stuff I could tell you about what's going on in the US, I've been collecting stuff, but I have no time to tell you anything about it. It's so deeply worrying. Honestly, it's astonishing, astonishing. Um, but anyway, back to Europe. You know, one worries about the effect that immigration is going to continue having uh, on Europe and European unity and European Union. We need the European Union to survive, no matter what whether you're remotely, say in Britain you're a Brexiteer, you might not be a big fan of the European Union. Without the European Union, Europe becomes a bunch of individual countries, and it then is open season for BRICS and the US to just carve up Europe. The EU is the future of democracy in the world. And I'm not understating this. So Putin wants to undo the EU. JD Vance wants to undo the EU and Trump by extension. It is the battlefield. It's a political battlefield. The sharks are swimming around the EU, ready to take chunks. So Gary Kasparov says Russia's weaponization of migrants into Europe was a surprising tactic that the EU still hasn't grappled with. Aside from causing general instability and costs, it often empowers the nationalists and far-right groups that usually have mutual support with Russia. Bang. It's what I've been saying for some time in terms of, this is a big challenge for Europe, the far right. And the far right have mutual alignment, support from and with Russia. It's really bizarre how the worm has turned. The former communist nation now really embracing ultra nationalism. Now, I talked about in my YouTube short video last night, just 3 minutes of me saying it's a real black and white war, and then this post came out just straight away afterwards, and like as this source says, this every single word of this is exactly what I was saying last night. So I'm just going to read this to you. This is coming from Emmanuel Shays, a Ukraine correspondent for West France, RFI, and France 24. 24. I must be living in an alternate reality, a reality where children are listed online for adoption, where journalists are tortured and killed in captivity, where hundreds of drones and missiles are routinely thrown at Ukraine. Because the more I voice those horrible things, the more they're met with indifference. And the other side invariably asks, are Ukrainians hopeful about peace? I feel that in the public sphere, the lines between both sides have become very much blurred, yet nothing has changed on the ground. This is what I was saying last night. It's like I get really frustrated that when you hear Trump speak, he talks about the deaths of Russians first and then mentions Ukrainians. And there's this both sidesism that is just completely unjustified, completely unjustified. So I feel in the public sphere, says Shays, the lines between both sides have become very much blurred, yet nothing's changed on the ground. Russia is still attacking Ukraine to expand its territory, bombs it daily, murders prisoners, kills Ukrainian civilians, traffics Ukrainian children. Ukrainians are not being difficult or unreasonable for defending themselves. It's terrifying to see how many people are unable to grasp the extent of the crimes Russia commits daily, and how easily they hide behind both sides' narratives, or Ukraine says, Russia says false equivalents. It feels like walking among anesthetized people. It's terrifying to report on horrific news and be met with, but are you sure this war crime really happened? What takes the most energy isn't learning to live under bombs, losing people I know regularly to the war, or even reporting on it. What worries me is how many people choose not to see, choose not to speak the truth too openly, and prefer to fool themselves into believing that Russia can be genuine in negotiations, just so they can continue living a normal life. Take that, go and find it, go and find that Emmanuel Shays. I mean, the link will be below. Put that on your social media. Share that. I'm going to do that. Share this. It needs to be shared. And finally, some good news, some nice news here. Young Ukrainian volunteers from the Garage Association have woven more than 700 camouflage nets, made hundreds of trench candles for the Ukrainian defenders in 2 years. Kids share, they do it because they know they can save soldiers' lives. So just a little bit of
Для
kids
мене це важливо, тому
doing.
що я розумію, що я не сиджу на місці, я хоч щось роблю. Скоріше вернутися додому, до своїх рідних, близьких. Що ці сітки допомагають військовим, зберігають їхнє життя.
Це дуже важливо на даний час. Я ходжу сюди кожен день з 4 по 9-10.
Так, я вважаю, що це корисна робота, тому що ми зберігаємо життя військовим. Щоб вони скоріше поверталися додому до своїх близьких.
Побажати військовим не падати духом.
Батьки вдома нас з братом майже не бачать. Ми весь вільний час знаходимося в гаражі, працюємо. На даний час це дуже велика потреба в маскувальних сітках.
2022 року це дуже важливо, тому що ми допомагаємо нашим військовим.
So that's really wonderful stuff there. Those kids feeling they are part of the support network, part of the war effort. And they are. That's not feeling like they are. They are. They're producing the stuff. They're helping out their soldiers. So fantastic. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate your support. Take care, everybody, and I will speak to you soon.